Are you ready?
Let's go.
Now circling in the neutral zone.
Here's the pitch on the way. 36 yards for the win.
This.
Here comes a big chance. The shot
is
this the dagger?
The neutral zone.
This is as good as it gets.
The Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca.
Now, here's your host, two-time Paralympian, Brock Richardson.
What's going on? It's time for another edition of The Neutral Zone. I am indeed your host, Brock Richardson. On this edition of The Neutral Zone, we are going to speak with James Duthie, who's going to stop by and talk about his career and all the stuff going on in the media world as it relates to Canada. Plus, we're going to talk a little bit about the news and notes of the things that have gone on in mainstream sports. I'm joined by Josh Watson and Cam Jenkins. Here comes your headlines.
Neutral Zone headlines.
We congratulate the Canadian men's wheelchair basketball team as they finish second at the Under-23 America's Championships, which were held from April 2nd to 6th in Bogota, Colombia. In a hard-fought gold medal game against the U.S., the final score was 71-41 for the United States. Congratulations, Team Canada.
We would also like to congratulate a former bocce player, Francois Bobiniere, who is being recognized by the Quebec Bocce organization for his many years of service to Canada. He represented Canada at multiple international events and Paralympics. So we congratulate him for being recognized by the organization, as it was a well-deserved recognition.
Canada men's soccer has reached its highest ever ranking of 30th on the FIFA World Ranking List. This is an outstanding achievement and well-deserved.
It was an all-Ontario final in the Junior East Tournament, held recently at the Chi-Wan Young Sports Centre in Charlottetown, PEI, on the 4th of April to the 6th. It was Ontario Black victorious with a score of 36-31 over Ontario Red. We congratulate the athletes and the Ontario Para Network on a successful weekend. Way to go, Team Ontario.
Those are your headlines for this week. If you want to get a hold of us on social, here's how you can do that.
And welcome back to the Neutral Zone broadcast booth.
Play ball!
We're set to get this ball game underway. The first pitch is brought to you by Brock Richardson's X account at Neutral Zone BR. Pitch and a strike. Hey, gang, why not strike up a chat with Claire Buchanan from the Neutral Zone? Find her on X at Neutral Zone CB. There's a swing of the chopper out to second base, right at Claire as she picks up the ball, throws it over to the first base for a routine play.
Out!
And fans, there's nothing routine about connecting with Cam and Josh from the Neutral Zone at Neutral Zone Cam J and at J Watson 200. And the Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Connect with them at ON Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca. Now that's a winning combination.
When you think of TSN and James Duthie, like many of us, you think of that exactly. TSN, the World Juniors, and Trade Center, NHL on TSN, and the Masters, and even the Olympics, just to name a few things that James Duthie is involved in. Today, we have the pleasure of talking to him about his wonderful career. James, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Brock, Cam, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So James, let's start off by maybe you could tell us how you became involved with sports media.
I'll try to give you the condensed version and not take up the entire podcast with this answer. I think a lot of sportscasters are failed athletes, and that's probably what I am to an extent. I wanted to be a football player, and I was an okay high school football player, but probably wasn't going to make the NFL as a 5'10", 155-pound defensive back with mediocre speed. So I was going to play at university at McGill, but then I decided to, I wanted to do something in sports with my life. I loved sports so much. And I remember going into a guidance counselor's office in high school and she's saying, I just want to do something in sports. And she plugged it into her computer And I think sports administration came up and journalism came up. And I said, ooh, journalism. And so I applied to journalism at Carleton and got in there and ended up being a news reporter for a bunch of years. There weren't a lot of jobs in sports when I started out, but eventually got a chance to do sports. And it's been, more than I ever dreamed of, getting the chance to do some of the things that you were mentioning and all the things I've gotten to do in my career. So, lucky I followed my gut that way.
Yeah, sometimes it really is just that gut instinct of jumping in the deep end and hoping that you can swim. And for you, you certainly have swam just fine.
Yeah, I sunk a couple of times, but managed to find my way to the top.
Yes.
The buoy pulled me back up above water.
Thank goodness for the buoy. We appreciate the buoys. You do a lot of panel work for NHL on TSN. As a viewer, what we see is pregame, and then we see intermissions and a little bit of postgame. But we know there's more to it than just that. Can you give us an idea of what goes into a 7 o'clock pregame and then through the game? Like, how early do we get started?
Sure. So, it's a weird job that we have, right? It's different than most careers, I think, in that, part of my job is just watching hockey. I watch as much hockey as I can. I read about it. I go into the stats every day. So on a typical day, I think my morning would start. I'd usually watch SportsCenter. I'll go to like NHL.com and check out longer versions of the highlights of the games I've seen and just maybe check through stats on the team. Let's say it's a Toronto San Jose game, and I'll check out San Jose just because I maybe haven't checked them out in a couple of weeks to see what exactly they've been doing. And then I'll go into work about 2 o'clock probably. We have a great team of producers. Bill's my usual producer. Bill and Jeff are the two of them. And they will sort of they'll talk to all the panelists during the day and get the ideas of what they want to talk about. And I think that's usually where the conversations start. Hey, what do you want to talk about tonight? And so somebody wants to talk about the power play. Somebody might want to talk about a fight that happened the night before. And he'll put together a lineup for the pregame show. Which is sort of a rough idea of what order we're going to go in. And we have some segments that are always in the pregame show. So I'll come in and usually the real work part for me is sort of between 2:30 and 4 o'clock, where I say write the show, but it's not really like that because there's no teleprompter and I'm not reading a script, but I will make all my notes of kind of the things I want to say, the questions I want to ask, the stats I want to use. And I'm very old school. I'll write that down on a piece of paper and just a bunch of point form notes. And I kind of outline the order of the show. And then we start taping segments around 5 o'clock. We tape something for SportsCenter. We usually tape the segment Insider Trading that you see. And then make our last preparations, and the pregame starts at 6:30. And once the show starts, this is where it's different from a job. I feel like it's the fun part is when actually doing the show. The only part that I actually call my job work is that little time in my office where I'm writing for an hour and a half and trying to think of things. That's the only thing that looks like a normal job. Besides that, you're just out there, hopefully, naturally having conversations with the panelists that you are with. And then obviously we watch the games and do the intermissions and do a little post-game thing. And that's it. When I repeat it, it doesn't sound like I do very much. So
you do a heck of a lot.
I don't know. It's not. It's a great look. I've been super lucky. It's a great job, and you never take it for granted. There are times where it gets really busy. Obviously, Stanley Cup playoffs, you're in more. Something like the World Juniors, where it's a little more detailed and it's a little busier. But the week-to-week stuff is pretty fun.
So what are some of the things you love about hosting a panel? Because a lot of the times you got a cast of characters on those panels, man.
I think that, what you said is exactly it. For really what my job is, besides getting us from A to B and throwing to commercial breaks and throwing to features and doing the odd interview, my job is I always consider my job to be the job of playing the role of you at home watching. So to figure out what are the most pertinent things to talk about and then to ask them the questions that I think the people at home would like to ask. I'm sure I don't get that right all the time because everybody has their own opinion. but to try to ask the questions that if I was sitting at home watching the game that I would ask. And besides that, you're just trying to roll with the conversation. So, it's great. I've had so many different personalities on panels. And the fact, you mentioned I get to do different sports. So I get all these different personalities. I did a soccer game last weekend, and, I get to listen to, to Kevin Kilban, and who's just this awesome expert on soccer. And then I'll do the Super Bowl and sit with Luke Wilson and Davis Sanchez, and go to the Masters in a couple of weeks and sit there with Bob Weeks and Graham Dillette, and then all the various guys I have on the hockey panel. So, but I don't think the job really changes as a host. Your job is to get the best out of the panelists and get some really strong opinions from them, and have them explain things that the viewer at home wants to know. So, but it's a blast. That's one of my favorite parts, is just working with different personalities, right? Jeff O'Neill is one of my favorites ever. All the ex-coaches we've had on the panel over the year. Everybody always asks me about John Tortorella, who of course is in the news right now, and he spent
a year. He may be a panelist of yours again pretty soon.
might be a panelist again. Well, Peter Laviolette is funny. Peter Laviolette was a panelist for us for about a year, and I don't know. He sent me like a Merry Christmas one time, a text or whatever, and I'm like, Pete, surprised to hear from you. Haven't heard from you in a while. He goes, always got to keep the doors open, Jimmy. never know when you might need to get back on the panel. So I got to keep sucking up to you.
It's funny you should bring up the panel, because when I was putting this together and looking over, bits of your career, and I could have spent like hours and hours looking at the stuff you've done. But one of the things that made me chuckle, and I'm paraphrasing because I can't find it on the fly, but it says something on X about, I'm a dad, I'm a journalist, and I'm also a father of some of the panelists. And I relate to what you're talking about, because sometimes it's one of those situations where your panelist is just trying to get your goat. Cameron and I spend a lot of time on this podcast getting each other's goats. And
I would never do that.
Never, not ever. And so my question to you is, and I'm going to pick on the O-Dog just because that's fun for me. Do you ever look at him and just be like, really? Like, you're getting my goat? Like, this is where we're going? Like, without obviously saying it? Like, do you ever just have those moments where you're just staring at him going, really, we're doing this right now? Like,
yeah, pretty much every night. I think I hadn't looked at my profile. What I wrote was father of 3 humans and 2 dogs, and legal guardian of several panelists, which is how I phrase it. And it was pretty apt description. Yeah, I mean, but I can't give O a hard time, because I probably give him as much of a hard time or a harder time than he gives me sometimes. But it's kind of just our shtick, right? And I love, he'll do something. If you watch closely, if I'm making some stupid crack, he will never smile. Like, he'll always just roll his eyes, and he does it on purpose so people will freeze frame it and post it on Twitter. But yeah, he's a very unique human being, but I love him. I mean, I think what everybody loves about him is he's so self-deprecating, right? And I try to feed into that as much as possible. Because I love it when he talks about, guys got to work harder back checking. And I'm like, did you watch yourself your entire career? But he's a charmer, and you need personalities like that. I always like, the panel we have for most Leaf games. Cheryl Pounder is really great at breaking down tape and getting into the details of the game. I really think she should be a coach. She's been a coach, but a coach at a high level someday, because she's fantastic at that. And Darren Drager's more an information guy, right, with the insider, and then O's the personality in the middle. And I think you need a blend of that kind of on every panel you get. You can't have too much personality. I mean, that's what every talk show is in the States. It's just guys yelling at each other. You can't have too much just X's and O's. So I think you blend all that together, and hopefully it works out.
With all that said, what are some of the challenges that you find navigating the panel, as you mentioned, with the different personalities? Like, what's the thing that you go, this is really difficult, but might be at the same time the fun part?
Yeah, I think it's, trying to get good conversation out of people. I remember, it used to be hard when Bob McKenzie was on the panel. It was hard, and that's not an insult to Bob. It's more a credit to Bob, is that Bob was so credible. Like he had this aura about him because his reputation, I think, is kind of unparalleled as sort of the voice of hockey for a long time. And I think that people were afraid to contradict him. So every person we'd have on the panel, and I sat beside Bob for, 15, 20 years, and we'd have all these ex-players, and we wouldn't get good arguments sometimes or conversations because no one would ever contradict Bob. And so, that's part of it. You want to have a lively conversation, but I also don't like fake debates. I mentioned those American shows. I think a lot of them are crap. Everybody takes one side, everybody takes another side. And that's one thing, when we do the quiz, that's one way to get different opinions out of people. But we don't tell somebody you have to answer the question this way. One of you has to answer yes, and one of you has to answer no, because that ends up just being fake. So you hope that people have contrary opinions to one another, and we try to find questions where people will have contrary opinions. But sometimes they just all agree on something, and that's fine too, I think. So I guess, my biggest challenge is trying to keep it lively and really trying to put the panelists in the best position possible to get their opinions out there, to ask I think it's my job to ask the right questions. If I ask some mumbled question, maybe that throws the panelist off, well, then you're not going to get the greatest opinions out of them. So I think more than anything else, it's pretty simple in that description, is that you just try to get the best out of the people sitting next to you.
So just as me as a fan watching the show with the panelists, do they really hate the quiz like they seem to let on?
Well, Torts definitely did. So I think Torts started that. He hated the quiz because, it was a lot of hypothetical situations, which he didn't like dealing with. And he didn't really like being on TV anyway. My favorite Torts quote, one night we were sitting there and I think we were having pizza watching a game, and he's like, God, I love this, guys. I love hanging out with you guys and just talking hockey, eating pizza, watching hockey. He goes, I just wish we didn't have to do the TV part. And I'm like, well, Torts, that's kind of the only reason you're actually here and getting paid for it. But I think there's part of us. I don't think they hate the quiz. The quiz master, who everybody thinks is me, I still, when I go out, people always yell quiz master, quiz master. There is actually a person, the quiz master, who's a guy who was named Steve Dryden, who was with us for the longest time. And actually all he really does now is the quiz. And he's very meticulous. Like, I think he'll come up with 20 quiz questions a week, and he'll pore over every word of the quiz. And then he'll call each one of the panelists 20 times to go over the questions and whether they like the questions or don't like the questions. And it drives them crazy because they're just like, just ask the questions. We don't care. So I think that's where the sort of hating of the quiz comes along, and we play into it. I enjoy playing into it. But it's a fun segment.
It's fun.
And for the people that don't, like, once in a while people will be like, oh, why do you do the quiz? It's so silly or whatever. Well, really all the quiz is a panel. It's really just a panel where you ask 4 very different things and get 3 different opinions in a 4-minute span. So it's really a trick. It's just a trick to get our panelists to give opinions and for us to cover a whole wide range of subjects really fast. So instead of talking about the Leafs power play for 4 minutes, we can talk about 4 or 5 different things in hockey. Bang, 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 bang. So, we dress it up and call it the quiz, and I awarded some silly belt at the end. But essentially, it's just a panel conversation. So I do laugh the odd person who says, I don't like the quiz. Well, it's no different than what we did in the segment before, where I just ask a bunch of questions. We just dress it up and act a little silly sometimes.
So I remember growing up as a wee child, and TSN was on, and I remember when TSN first aired, and it seems like to me the first real big event was the World Juniors, and it's become such a big event now. What's something that goes into that event that is like 10 days long?
Yeah, I think you're right in many ways. The World Juniors, TSN's aired a lot of sports for a long time, but I think the World Juniors is probably the most synonymous event with TSN. And, I give credit to our network there and to Hockey Canada, I guess, where this really wasn't a big deal, this tournament. I mean, it was always a big deal to the players, but wasn't a big deal to the public. And TSN sort of had this void in its programming over the Christmas holidays and decided to pick it up. And it, the Canadian public, because we're so crazy about hockey, loved it. And it grew into this behemoth that it is now, and this sort of tradition in the country. So I think that's something I think TSN takes a lot of pride in. And it's become, we treat it like a major event. Like, it's as big as the Grey Cup is probably the other biggest event that TSN produces during the season. And we treat it like the Grey Cup. The crew is huge. The best people are working on it, the best directors, the best producers. And a ton goes into it, research, whatever. We treat it like it's a Stanley Cup final. And so, some 18-year-old kid from Latvia we'll do the research to find out what his background is, just like you would for, the Oilers and the Panthers or something playing in a cup final. So for me, it's my favorite event of the year. It used to ruin all our family Christmases, like when my kids were little. But so there was always that part of it. But I always say, once Christmas is over, around Christmas Day, what do you got to do after that anyway, right? So and I think that's why it's been popular. Is you got a lot of families sitting around, and once Christmas is over, what are they sitting around for the holidays? They need something to do, and so they watch the World Juniors. So I love it. It's like I said, probably up with the Masters, my two favorite things to do every single year. And I just think it's the best hockey we see all year. I love the NHL. I love the Stanley Cup playoffs. But the fact that these are kids who make mistakes, and that makes for exciting hockey, right? You get a lot of these 6-5 games or 3-goal leads to get blown because they're kids. And they play just breakneck pace hockey. So it's a treat to do every single year.
To the demise of my family, I tell them that my holiday starts on Boxing Day, and they all just look at me like, "Oh my God, really? We're doing this again?" But yeah, that's my true feeling, James. So it really is true about the World Juniors and what it's become. There's been so many cities that you have traveled to with the World Juniors. Would you say that there is been a best host city? I can think of one as a viewer, but I'm curious where you would land as a person who's covered it for so long.
So I won't. Usually, a World Juniors in Canada is always great, and that's not to knock any of the ones overseas. It's gotten better, I think, overseas certainly. I have probably two favorites, and that would be Ottawa in 2009. But the thing is, you're partially impacted by what happened in the tournament, right? So, I wouldn't probably put Saskatoon in 2010, even though it was a great tournament, because they lost in overtime. So you have the fond memories when Canada wins, and obviously that was the Eberle tournament. It was also my hometown. It was also, just the atmosphere in the arena was fantastic. The other one I'd put right at the top would be Halifax. And that was, the circumstances, of coming out of COVID and all those messy tournaments in Edmonton that got canceled or postponed to the summer. And the atmosphere in Halifax was electric. And I really liked the idea that they went back to a junior hockey rink. I think the tournament started making so much money that they always felt they had to be in NHL rinks. And so the idea of going back to a little barn of 10,000, it felt really cool in there. And obviously you had Connor Bedard and everything else. But just to go back to what I was saying, if you take away just the good feelings of Canada winning, Vancouver, I don't know, 18, 19, the years all blend into one for me. They lost in the quarterfinals in overtime to Finland. Noah Dobson got a busted stick. And so nobody will ever remember that one because Canada lost in the quarters, but that tournament was great. The buzz in Vancouver was awesome. The atmosphere on the streets was awesome. And that was trending towards being one of my favorite World Juniors ever until Canada lost in the quarters. So, and Ottawa this year was the same thing. Ottawa was just buzzing the entire time, and then Canada loses in the quarters, and it kind of pops the balloon a little bit. So, but I put it this way, I haven't had a bad time at a World Juniors anywhere.
So let's get to one of my used to be favorite days.
Except the COVID one in Edmonton when it got canceled and I was locked in my hotel room for 5 days.
Yeah, that would suck. So getting to one of my favorite days of the year, well, there's actually two on TSN. One is Free Agent Frenzy, or a Free Agent Day. And then the other one, of course, is the trade deadline. So with the trade deadline, in my opinion, we don't see as many deals as we used to, or at least the deals that I'm seeing is kind of a person that's about to be a free agent for pick day. Right. Rather than like hockey trades. There was a bit more this year, and that might be because of the salary cap going up, and there might be different reasons as to that. Right. What is it like to have to fill that extra time when there aren't a lot of trades that are happening? And you joke about it all the time, whether or not you're promoting the trade deadline day or actually on the trade deadline day. What's it actually like to have to put in those, 10-hour days? Yeah, it is a little daunting. And for years I would get, I don't know if stressed is the right word, but I definitely wouldn't look forward to it, simply because it doesn't get any shorter. Every year I look over at ODOG at around 11 a.m. and go, holy crap, we got 6 hours left, or whatever it is, right? I think I accepted it at a certain point a couple of years ago. I would go on social media, and every time a trade happened before the deadline, I would post some meme of me, curled up in the corner in a fetal position sobbing or whatever. I kind of played into that, and part of it was true, but I kind of accepted. I think GM sort of figured out a few years ago that they didn't want to wait until 2:00 on deadline day to make a big deal. And so all the significant deals were made before. You're right that maybe we had a little bit of a comeback this year, and I hope that that's a trend. That a lot of stuff, the Rantanen deal happened on trade deadline day. There was a really good hockey trade in the Dylan Cousins, Josh Norris deal. So we didn't get a good volume of action, but we got some really, really interesting things that happened on deadline day this year. So I would say it was one of the more interesting ones that we've ever had. Now, whether that was a blip and we go back to, like you say, a bunch of, rentals and third line centers and seventh defensemen next year, defenseman, that's a possibility. A long-winded way of answering your question is we do a lot of work. Our producers, Mike Lane, Bill, Jeff, they do a ton of work beforehand, the Quizmaster, putting together segments to fill the time. So we basically have, when we go in there, when I sit down at that desk and we go on the air at 8 a.m., if there were no trades, we would have, 5 hours worth of filler quizzes and all the silly gimmicks with Plinko we did this year. We always have enough to talk about. So we're never going to be sitting there twiddling our thumbs. So they do a really good job of that. And that makes you feel a little more comfortable when you sit down that, we have 20 commentators. And I've come to sort of take it as it's pretty rare to get to sit there in the studio with 20 really smart people. Basically, it's the only day where all our analysts, all our insiders are in the studio together. And I think, I can't talk for most Canadians, but I kind of think that's why it's a popular show. Sometimes I don't understand why everybody watches all day, but I think that it's kind of a celebration of how crazy we are about hockey in this country. Is that the mere idea that people will book off work or call in sick to watch the show for 10 hours, it just shows us how crazy you are, Cam. Thank you. Yep. And other Canadians are to actually do that. So the days are long, but like I said, it's a privilege to be able to do every year. So I the sick part of me kind of enjoys it.
The Mission Impossible intro this year was just fantastic. Yeah, and if our listeners haven't seen it, it's just go back and look it up on YouTube.
The sad part on the YouTube part is that this is a whole little sidetrack, but you have to pay to use music on the air. You have to license music, and so we actually licensed the Mission Impossible theme for that entire thing. So if you saw it on television, it was Mission Impossible. But they would not let us license it for digital. And so we had to replace the music for Twitter and for YouTube. So thanks for saying that, Brock. And if people go on and watch it on YouTube, try to imagine it with the Mission Impossible music, because it was kind of way better.
I didn't even realize that. Wow, that's I watched it at 8 a.m. So I was
little stuff on TV that that you don't know. Like there's a month of negotiations between our people and their team to get the Mission Impossible music, and you have to pay a certain amount for this and a certain amount for that, and you can only use 3 minutes total or something like that. So it's all stuff that's beyond my pay scale.
Me too. You have had the privilege of being involved in Olympic coverage, most notably, obviously, Vancouver in 2010. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and also just others of being involved in Olympic stuff?
Yeah, probably the highlight of my career. There's a few on there, and I've been lucky enough to be at a lot of cool things. But if you were to ask me the highlight of my career, I'd probably say 2010 in Vancouver, just because I was a real Olympic geek when I was a kid. I loved the Olympics, loved it. I watched, like when I was 10 years old, I would watch every frame from Montreal, and then the Winter Games that came after that in Lake Placid, and go out. And I remember I lived on this Greenbelt Hill, and when I lived in Ottawa, and we built a ski jump and had my cross country skis and would go do ski jumps because there was a ski jumper named Horst Bulau who went to my high school. So I love the Olympics and the chance to do it. And I followed it from the beginning. I was in Prague in 2006 or 2005 when Vancouver got the Olympics, was able to cover that. And so the chance to actually host, and I had a really cool job there. I hosted with Lisa Laflamme during the day, and then I would go down and host the hockey games at night with the panel. And so it was just really cool. And something every broadcaster, I think, would tell you about the Olympics, it's kind of hell, just because it's so much work. Everybody working on the Olympics, it's tireless, endless days. So I probably slept 2 hours a night that entire time. And you're crossing off the days to when it's over. And then when it's over, you go, oh man, I can't believe this is over. This was the greatest time of my life, right? You're completely exhausted and depleted, but it's so good to experience. And Vancouver was so alive. Part of the reason I got 2 hours sleep is that I would go out a few nights too, because I just wanted to experience it, right? And so it was, we were probably 30 feet away from where Crosby scored the goal because we had this little set that was right over the Zamboni entrance. And just a complete magical time.
That's amazing. The landscape of sports media has changed, when you first got into it, compared to like now and what it is now. Where do you see it headed? And do you think there's any desire for more sports media companies in this country?
That's a great question. Well, where it's headed is a tough one. I'll get asked by students, about how to get into the business and such. Now, I don't really have answers. I got into it so long ago, and it's so hard now because it's been shrinking so much, right? There's less and less entities that do it. Newspapers, news or divisions are having a hard time. Live sports almost seems like the last, true place where it survives on television. And even live sports is going to streaming more and more. So I mean, that's the short answer is it's going to be more and more streaming, and we have to probably in 10 years from now, I don't know, maybe 10 years, everything will be streamed. I don't know. I don't have enough foresight. I'm not a good futurist that way. The one thing I do say is that a lot of people in the media, if, young people go to them and say, hey, I want to work in the media, they'll say, no, run the other way, do something else. And I think that's fair advice because it's hard. But I think there's always going to be the need for storytellers, right? Whatever form that takes. Podcasts didn't exist, 15 years ago. And now look what they do. Look what you guys are doing here, right? And I think it's a really cool medium to tell stories. And so there's always going to be a need for that, right? Some of the biggest people in the media business now are podcasters. And this entity didn't even exist 15 years ago. So what's going to be the next entity? So all I would say with sports media is it's always going to be there in some form. There's always going to be platforms like this and people talking. It will take different forms than the traditional media that I grew up with, where I would just listen to the radio in the morning to get my scores and then watch the 6 o'clock news in Ottawa to get my highlights. TSN didn't even exist. So that's what I grew up with. The 6 o'clock sports anchor was the kind of the guy I got all my information from, where I'd read the paper and check the scores in the paper. And it's so different now with social media and pods and everything else. So I'm not smart enough to know where it's going to go in 10 years, but like I said, you're always going to need storytellers in the world. And that's essentially what we do, is we tell stories.
Yeah. James, I gotta ask you, if I didn't, I would kick myself. So I gotta ask you, what is the prospect for the Toronto Maple Leafs this year? I mean, we've been talking about it for a couple of weeks, and we've been saying, first place in the division is key because you don't want to get into that mess. Yeah. What is the benchmark for James Duthie? Like, where do we sit and say this was a success? Because one of our panelists said Stanley Cup or bust, and I'm going, I don't know that that's fair, but where do you land on it?
Yeah, I don't think that's the case. I mean, you'd like to think the players think that way, but I mean, let's face it, if they got to an Eastern Conference final, I think that would be a step. If you got to a Stanley Cup final, I think that would be a successful season. Obviously, some people who probably watch this would say, look, if you don't win the Stanley Cup, what's the point? But I think with the history of this team, I think that would be an accomplishment. The short answer is, I'd like to offer some expert opinion here, but I don't believe I am one. I don't believe I'm smarter than either of you two in knowing what the Leafs are going to do, because I watch them just like you guys do, and you don't really know what you're going to get every night. It is this dynamic. Are they better with Tanev come playoff time? Yes. Are they probably better with this 1-2 in net? I really like Stolarz, but we've never really seen him as a starter in the playoffs. So I think there's pieces there that are better. That look like a better playoff team, but in the end, it's probably all going to come down to whether Marner and Nylander and Matthews have an awesome playoffs or not. So, and who they play. I mean, if they have to go through the two Florida teams, that's tough. Even if they get Ottawa in the first round, that's not a great. They haven't
beat them at all this year.
Yeah, it's not a great matchup for them either. So, would it shock me? Would they shock me if they went on a deep run? No, it wouldn't shock me, because they have a ton of talent. But you need a hot goalie, and you need your stars to be excellent, and all the other stuff is just periphery, really. And so there's not a lot of history that shows that'll happen, but this could be the year as well. So I don't think that's a great answer for you, but anybody who comes on here and is bold and says they know what's going to happen with the Leafs is lying, because nobody knows what's going to happen with the Leafs.
100%.
I have to go you're asking me about my day. I actually have to go do a game now. I hope I don't want to cut you guys off. I hope we were close to the end
done.
Of questions.
We're good. I was just about to close it off for you. And James, it's been a pleasure for us to have you. Thank you for spending 30 minutes with us. And I've looked up to you as a host of my own panel, and so thank you very much for taking the time. All it was a little bit of an question to you, and that's how we got connected. So thank you so much.
No, my absolute pleasure, and fun being on with you guys. Fun talking to you guys, and thanks for watching our silly panel and our silly quiz every week.
We'll do it.
Doing it tonight too.
Every night. So there you go.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.
The Neutral Zone is sponsored by the Ontario Para Network. Their focus on the growth and development of wheelchair basketball, tennis, and rugby in Ontario.
Vladimir Guerrero Jr. signs with the Toronto Blue Jays, 14 years, $500 million, which is $5 per season. What is your reaction to this? Let's start with Cameron on this one.
I think it had to be done. I think that, I was worried once, February 18th, he set a deadline that he wasn't, if it wasn't done by then he'd be going to free agency. So I was quite worried after that because, Bo Bichette, he's not signed. I think there's a pitcher that's going to be a free agent after this season. I don't remember who it is, but yeah, me being the Toronto pessimist of sports, I was worried that this might be it and we'd be in a rebuild. So I'm glad that they were able to get the deal done. $500 million over 14 years. None of it's deferred as far as the money goes as well. So I think they said it was the second highest contract in history based on average annual value. So I think, Vladdy, he's an elite hitter. And that's what got him this contract because of the numbers and stats that show he's such an elite hitter. Defense, that's a little bit to be desired, but I think he has done really well at first base. And, in this day and age, if he's not able to be in the field anymore, he can become a DH somewhere down the road. But he's going to be with the Jays hopefully until the age of 40 years old. So it's going to be nice to have a homegrown player that went through the system. He was signed by the Jays when he was 16 years old, kind of gone through up the ranks, and hopefully he's going to be a Blue Jay for life. And hopefully not to put too much pressure on him, but gets a couple of World Series here and gets into the Baseball Hall of Fame with the Blue Jays cap.
Yeah, it's a great day for Blue Jay fans. I'm very excited to know that it is done. Having said that, $500 million is a lot of money, but of course it all depends on inflation and everything else. This may end up being a very reasonable contract by the time it's over. It will all depend on how his production either waxes or wanes, so to speak. But I'm very happy to see him as a Blue Jay. I am quite certain that I openly said on this podcast that if Shapiro and Atkins didn't find a way to get this done, that they needed to go. And I'm still not convinced that they should stay, but at least they've gotten this done. Now let's get Bo under contract. Let's get Barrios, Gosman. Let's lock down our pitchers. Let's make a run at this now. We've got no excuses. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, as for defense, I think he's at the spot he should be. He's at first base. I think there's less defense usually required at first base. It's not like third base where you're ranging to your left and right and up and down and all over the place. And I still have seen him stretch for some throws across the diamond that I could not make based on my anatomy. So I think he's doing pretty well at defending first base. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think from the programs that I watched today and the reaction that I got from it, it feels to me like people are underestimating his skills at first base, because people are like, well, that's an expensive first baseman. And it is, but he's very skilled at first base. And as you rightfully point out, Josh, those are things that he does at first base that I know I couldn't do. It hurts my groin watching him stretch sometimes, and it's like, that's not supposed to do that. So it's, but he's put himself in the position to be able to do that. I am happy to see this deal done. I am happy to see that there's a no trade deal. That's to be expected for a 14-year deal. That's not to say that you can't trade somebody, but the reality is he's a Blue Jay for his career. If somebody wants to sign him at the age of 40 at the end, be my guest, but we'll have him for the prime years. And I'm happy that the organization did the right thing and paid him the money he deserves. I think he did take a little bit of a haircut, because I do honestly think he could have gotten another $50 million probably outside of the market. Some team would have been silly enough to pay him another, $50 million precisely.
New York Mets.
Or the Dodgers, anybody. There would have been a team that would have done it. So I do think, let's be fair to Vladdy and realize that he did, take a pay cut, and that's because he wanted to stay a Toronto Blue Jay. Here's my next question, because, we can't just be happy on one deal. Would you be more likely to give Bo Bichette a 14-year deal like you did this one, or would you be more likely to give him the 5 to 7 year range? That's where I land. I'd like to see Bo 5 to 7 years, see what we do there, and go from there. Josh, start with you, and then we'll go straight over to Cameron.
I love the fact that you're thinking that way, because I think in 5 to 7 years, his defensive ability will definitely be different than it is today. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be possible. I don't think he's going to accept a term that short, particularly when you've just signed Guerrero Jr. to the contract you've signed him for. They have come up together. They have played together. I've read reports today that they want to spend their entire careers together. If that's the case, you're not going to get him for 5 to 7 years unless you're willing to re-up and pay him again in 7 years, which I don't think this Blue Jays team is. So personally, would I prefer to see a short contract? Yes. Will that happen? I just don't believe so.
Yeah, a lot of people are wanting long-term contracts because it gives financial security. I was just taking a look at his stats, from 2019 to 2025. And, he has the average anywhere from 301 to 306 and, in the 290s as well, as far as average goes. And it seems like 2021, 2022, and 2023 were his best RBI years. Starting 2021 is at 102, then 93, and then 73 in 2023. And he's got a bunch of hits. Obviously, last year he was hurt. But so far, 12 games into the season, whatever it happens to be the right number, he's doing very well. And I think he's going to get close to 200 hits or very close to that again this year. So that's a long-winded way of saying that I would give him a 10 to 13, 14-year contract. What that number is, I have no clue, because I have no idea what his value is. I haven't heard anything or listened or read anything. So, I have no clue what his value is on the open market. So I guess closer to the deadline, maybe we'll start to hear that and hear what he may get as far as the value on a contract.
Yeah, I also think that you're going to find that Bo might be a little more challenging of a customer than Vladdy was. My impression is that Vladdy wanted to be a Blue Jay, wanted to stay a Blue Jay. I feel like with Bichette, he's been a little more vocal about things and wanting to see improvements on the team. So I wonder how easy a negotiation it's going to be for this front office with him. But I certainly
no negotiation is easy.
Well, no, that is very true. But I just think that Bo has some very definite ideas about what he expects the team to do. And I don't know if this team will be able to do that. So we'll see what happens. I would love to see them both signed long-term. I would love to see us build around them. But with Vladdy signing his contract, we now need a contract from Bo that allows us to work on things and improve things.
Yeah, and I'll be honest. The number that I have, and maybe I'm crazy, but the number that I have is I would pay him about $300 million. That's my max. I don't think he's worth more than that. I don't think he's worth comparably as much as Vladdy's gotten. For me, I look at this and I say, give him $30 million over 10 years if you must. That's my max. If you want to be here for longer, then you're still getting the $300 million. In my book, it's going to be spread out differently. That's my view, and that goes to Josh's point about the being more vocal about not wanting to be here, and at times last year he was okay. He told Hazel May that he would be okay leaving and be traded at the trade deadline. Of course, money brings everything out again, certainly, but I would be giving him $200 million less, and for me, the max I would do is a 10-year deal with Bo. That's my 2 cents with Bo Bichette.
And the thing with Bo too is that he has said that he wants to stay with Vladdy and win a World Series with Vladdy. So take that into account too. And what the Blue Jays need to fix is the damn bullpen, or at least the manager that is making the decisions for the bullpen. That's what they need to damn well figure out, because their starting pitching is fine. Get the damn bullpen fixed, and then you're fine.
Here we go again with the manager.
Yeah.
Boy.
What game is this, Josh? It's 11 now, I think, is what we're at. Or we're already talking about
something like that. Just, I understand
they need
point.
to hit too. And that's not John Schneider's fault.
No,
they're not hitting anything. They only got 3 runs or 3 RBIs in the whole series against the Mets last weekend. So they need to hit too.
Absolutely, they do. But it's also April. And we know that historically, this team does not hit well in April.
No excuse.
So, yeah, well, that's fine. To you, it's not. To me, I look at it, and I've espoused this before. A lot of these guys are Latin American guys, and they're used to playing in warm weather, and it's not warm right now. Like, Boston is moving up their games to 6:45 because it's so cold at night in New England. So,
yeah. And how is Boston doing this year?
I don't know. I don't really care. Don't really care. But it begs the point. Guys take a while to warm up, especially batters. And I would rather see them take their time and maybe have some struggles early if it means that they peak in August and September and October.
Look, as we're recording this, they're sitting at the 500 mark, and you can't win a championship in March, but you can certainly dig yourself a hole in March that you really have trouble getting out of. And they've had to play the Orioles, who a lot of people look at the Orioles and say that could be a good team. They've had to play the Mets, who a lot of people say that could be a good team as well. So to be 5-5 after 10 games as we record this, I'm okay with that. It could be a lot worse. Certainly it could be a lot better when you consider that they had a 5-2 homestand. But oh look, if you look up at home, there was a roof over top of the center, and they're not afforded that over this next 10 games. So we'll see. Of which, again, they have to play the Orioles at the end of this road trip again. So lots of Blue Jays talk to be had over the course of the summer. I wanted to take some time and talk about Vladdy's deal because I think that was big news coming out this week. The other thing I want to take some time in discussing is recently Alexander Ovechkin becomes the all-time scoring leader, surpassing Wayne Gretzky at 894. He now holds 895. What is your overall reaction to this? Let's start with Cameron.
You have to give him his due for having such a long career, and he's been relatively healthy his entire career as well. And that's really hard to do, and to score as much as he's been doing as well. And he's still got another year on his contract. So I think, what is he, 100 goals away from 1,000? 5 goals away from 900, I think. Or 5 or 6, whatever. I suck at math.
5 goals
doing
away
sports,
from
I'm not doing math. So can he get to 1,000? Like, who knows? So as a person who has got this achievement, I'm happy for him, and he's done a phenomenal job over the years doing this. But it's really hard to take away, for me anyway, the politics of it all and how he is Russian and how he supports Putin. And that just kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth. But like I said, I'm trying to separate that from the achievement just as a hockey player and not looking at, the country or who he supports, because it is an outstanding achievement. And Gretzky was there to shake his hand, as I believe it was Gordie Howe did for Gretzky when he beat or passed Gordie Howe. So, good for him. And it's really hard to score goals in the NHL. So good for him.
Josh, before you give your answer, I want to check on my co-host. Are you okay? Do you need a hug today or what? Like you were a bit negative on the Blue Jays, and now are you okay? Are you feeling good today?
You think that was negative about the Blue Jays?
A little bit, yeah.
Oh my God. All I said was the bullpen, and it does suck.
I know.
That's not being negative. That's being a realist. And who puts those people in? The manager does. He makes the decisions.
I'm just checking if you're okay, because when you said about him, being Russian, and I will say I agree, I do get it, but I was like, eesh, you got to go there on this poor guy's accomplishment. Like, give him a minute before.
That's part of the story, I think.
You're right.
For a lot of people as well. There's the person that's done that, and that's a great accomplishment. However, I don't agree him supporting Putin and what Putin is doing in the world, as well as some other president that I think we all have heard enough about for a long time. Yeah, like, I'm going to be real, and I'm going to put whatever's going on in the conversation, and politics in this case is part of it.
Fair. Okay, Josh, go ahead.
I think that it's a great accomplishment. He managed to set the record in the same number of games as Gretzky, which I think is interesting. I think it's something to be noted. And I think it's why you saw him set it last night as opposed to waiting until he was at home or waiting until he was in this place or that place or whatever the case may be. I really think it mattered to him that he set the record in the same number of games. So he's managed to do that. I feel a little bit for the New York Islanders, whose game got stopped and basically turned into an Ovechkin love fest in their arena. But I think if you looked in the crowd, everybody knew what was going to happen, and everybody knew that they wanted to be there to witness history. So we did. Wayne was very gracious, and I think ultimately that records are made to be broken, but I don't know if this one ever will, because as Cameron pointed out, he's only 5 goals away from 900. He could possibly do that this year. I don't think he will, but he could. I don't think he's going to get to 1,000, as Cameron suggested, because 100 goals in a year is pretty hard to do. 50 and 60 goals is usually the cream of the crop for an NHL season. But you know what? If anybody can do it, why not it be the leading goal scorer in the league? So we'll see what happens. I personally, whether it's good, bad, right, wrong, or indifferent, I choose to put political stuff aside when I'm watching sports for the most part. The Olympics are a little bit of a different animal in that regard, but when it comes to professional sports, I try and put an athlete's politics aside, just because I do feel like it should be based on their athletic ability, because it's athletic ability, not political association, that has gotten them to where they are. But I certainly understand Cameron's point that it is part of the story and it does need to be brought up. And again, I don't know what will happen. What's interesting to me at this point is I wonder if he will play the last year of his contract, or if he'll finish up this year and decide that he and his wife and the kids are going to go back to Russia, and he's going to do the Jaromir Jagr thing where he buys essentially a beer league hockey team and goes out and scores 60 goals a year in the beer league hockey league. I mean, Jagr is still going at 40 something over in Czech Republic. So, I mean, to Cameron's point about politics, maybe he and Putin decide that they're going to go on a countrywide caravan and just whoop it up and feed each other passes so that they can score goals. Like, who knows? But
drink some Russian vodka and do some shots and go from there.
I was going to say, the one thing I would consider doing is taking the opponent of the Capitals in tonight's game or their next game as the favorite to win, because I have a feeling a bunch of Caps are going to be hungover.
Yeah, I think I believe I also heard that obviously Ovechkin scored against the Islanders, and when Gretzky scored his goal to be the goal leader, it was also against the Islanders.
Huh. That might be true. I didn't hear that myself, but I don't doubt your sources on that, because you're usually pretty good with that information, so I trust you.
That's really cool. If that's like when you put it all together and you say he did it in the same number of games, the same team, like that, like the same franchise, like that's crazy. And I've been, because I'm weird and I'm like this, but like I've been watching Gretzky's last game, and I'm trying to find that whole, like when he was on the pickup truck at MSG, which wasn't called, yeah, it was MSG, when he retired and he was on a pickup truck. I can't find it because I remember there being such pomp and circumstance when Gretzky retired in the last game, and it's cool and I get it, and I appreciate very much what Alex Ovechkin did. I will also say this. I felt really bad for the goalie that had to be the person to give up that record-setting goal, but at the same time,
it was Sorokin.
Now, which is also a Russian goalie, which is kind of cool in the same way.
And a goalie he had never scored against.
Yeah, and that's true too. And Gretzky scored his final NH goal in March 1999 against the Islanders.
Yeah, wow.
There you go.
That really is something when you put it all together. I'm going to put this on the table because I wanted to have some fun to end the show, but there's no denying that he's now the greatest scorer of all time. Because of that, can you call him the greatest player of all time? Why or why not? Let's start with Josh on this one and go straight over to Cameron.
Ooh, the one question I should have done some prep for. I'm kidding, of course. No, I'm absolutely fine with him being the greatest goal scorer ever. I don't think I can get on board with the greatest player ever. And off the top of my head, I couldn't really tell you who I think is the greatest player ever, but I feel like his game is very one-dimensional. Like, I feel like he's all gas and no brakes, so to speak. He's constantly trying to get to a point where he can score. I'm not so sure that he's the best defender. I haven't looked up his plus minus. Maybe Cameron has it there, but I have trouble calling him the best of all time, and I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, to me, Gretzky's the best of all time. And yeah, so he's one less goal than Ovechkin, but the amount of points that Gretzky got I think it was over 2,000 or whatever it was, like the assists that he got. I would certainly call the great one the overall better player and the greatest of all time, the GOAT, because of all that he accomplished, how many records that he has, how many overall points that he has, not just the most goals of all time but I think he has the most assists of all time too. So yeah, to me, it's still Gretzky. I think he's the best of all time.
Yeah, and you're also I can think of two other people that you could have the conversation. You could have one other person you could have the conversation today, and another one that you can't yet, but you could in the future. And the one you can have now is Mario Lemieux. You could put him in the conversation for among the greatest players of all time, but you could also put Wayne Gretzky. I'm with both of you. I have trouble putting Alex Ovechkin as the literal great. I think we refer to Wayne Gretzky as the great one for a reason, and I think that will always be the way. But again, McDavid is only 10 years into his career, and so you don't know what that's going to hold for the future. And if he keeps going the way that he does, and how many Stanley Cups does he actually get? Does he get 2, 3, 4 by the time his career is done? We don't know. And so to literally say to Ovechkin, you're now the greatest because you have passed Wayne Gretzky in one statistic, yeah, I'm with you guys. I don't know about that. Any other comment that we want to put out there that we might have missed?
Yep. Because I'm just looking at Wayne Gretzky versus Ovechkin as far as overall stats goes. So obviously in goals, he to 95. So he passed him. But assists, Ovechkin is 724. Does anyone want to guess how many assists Gretzky had?
I think I saw it was in the neighborhood of 2,300.
2,027. And that's a total of 2,967 points. And Ovechkin has 1,619.
Yeah.
So right there. And then I think somebody was asking about plus minus. It says on this, what I'm looking at is StatHead Hockey. It says plus minus for Gretzky was plus 540. For Alex Ovechkin, it's plus 62.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's your argument for best player of all time right there.
Yeah. But plus minus, I've had this debate with a couple of friends before, and plus minus, that's not necessarily a useful stat either, because you could be like, oh my God, they're going to score. And then you get off the ice and somebody just comes on, is not even in the play yet. And then all of a sudden they're a minus. So I think plus minus is rather a useless stat.
Interesting.
Fair.
Yeah, no, with those stats, Cameron, that you just it's not even a conversation.
Gretzky got 4 championships to Ovechkin's 1. Mind you, Ovechkin's still playing. Gretzky got the Hart 9 times to 3 times for Ovechkin. Art Ross 10 times to 1. Smythe 2 times to 1. All over, the Rocket Richard. Well, that wasn't around when Gretzky was there, but Ovechkin's got 9 for the Rocket Richard, but that wasn't even around when Gretzky was there. If it was, he probably would have won some of the Rocket Richard trophies too. So to me, it sucked that a Russian has beat a Canadian, because I'm being patriotic here. But I think overall, the Canadian Wayne Gretzky, he's still the GOAT.
And also, while we're on the topic of Wayne Gretzky, and we do have to go at some point during this conversation, but I want to say this whole narrative that people are disappointed about him being Canadian because of, being involved in being at Trump's inauguration, and then people putting, bodily functions on statues that, like, so let's be better as a society here, and let's not do things like that. And to say that we take away his Canadian because of the choices he made, I don't think that's fair. I'll give you both a chance to respond to my thought there. Cameron, go first.
I thought you didn't want me talking about politics anymore on this podcast.
No, I didn't say that. I just wondered if you were grumpy.
It's just about being grumpy. Okay. Yeah, like that's despicable. No matter if you're disappointed in a player or not because of their political views, don't boo the anthem. Try to find a different way that you can show your disdain. But I understand why they do it because, that's a story. And a lot of people are going to see that because it's on television as an example. But I wish they could do it in a different form, but still be able to impact as many people. And I'm not a Elon Musk fan, but if you don't want to buy his cars and show disdain that way, great. But don't go, doing painting and destroying it and fires or whatever's been going on. Like there's just no need for that. So stop it.
Yeah, ultimately, I agree with both of you, I think, on this. I don't think there's any place for booing an anthem, but I also don't feel that the anthem is really necessary before a sporting event anymore.
Hear to that.
Yeah.
But that's my personal opinion on that. Yeah, there are other ways to show how you feel besides that. And try to remember, people, that most people playing the game, especially in like the NHL and Major League Baseball, they might not even be Americans. So they're going through this even though it's not their country's flag. So like, what skin is there to them if you're booing the American national anthem? Like they're maybe transplanted Americans, they're Latin Americans, or they're Cuban Americans, or whatever, or they're Canadians in the case of the NHL. Show your patriotism with your dollars. Buy Canadian. Understand things that are made in Canada, things that are packaged in Canada. Support those brands as opposed to some of the others that maybe you have in the past. And that really shouldn't have to stop when the tariff war stops. Like, we should be buying Canadian anyway. We should be supporting our neighbors. But that's a whole other topic for a whole other day.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think that it should be something that's, left outside of sports. I'm okay with the anthem, by the way, in international events when it's the end of the game and the winner gets it. As for what happens before a hockey game, I don't understand that. Before we close off today, I want to let the audience know, because we didn't do a lot of parasport talk today, but I just want to shout out 2 events that are going on. There's an international bocce event going on this weekend and this week. So go to the Canadian Cerebral Palsy Sports Association for all of the details on that. And then in Quebec this weekend, if you're watching it on release time, from April 10th to the 13th is the CWBL finals that are going on right now. So in Quebec, so we wish everybody involved there the best of luck, and we will have your results for you there next week. That is the end of our program for this week. I would like to thank Cam Jenkins, Josh Watson. I'd also like to thank our technical producer, Mark Aflalo. Stay tuned for next week, because you just never know what happens when you enter the Neutral Zone. Be safe, be well.
The Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Connect with them at ON Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca. Now that's a winning combination.